My husband looked me in the eye, told me he just needed some space, and then drove off, leaving me 8 months pregnant, standing alone in our driveway. Hours later, I checked our bank account. It was empty. He hadn't just left me. He had stolen everything and disappeared without a trace. The gravel crunched under his tires as he backed out of the driveway. I stood there, one hand on my belly, the other gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. My husband, my partner, the father of my child was leaving. Just like that. "You'll be fine," he had said, voice casual, like he was heading to the store and not walking out on his pregnant wife. "I just need some time to think." Think? Now? With 8 weeks until our baby was due? I swallowed hard, refusing to chase after him, to beg. If I spoke, I knew my voice would shake. So I just watched, feet planted, breath shallow. The red glow of his taillights flickered, then disappeared down the street. Gone. The silence hit first. Then, the weight of what had just happened crashed down on me like a wave. I pressed a hand to my belly, feeling the soft shift of movement inside. My baby. The only person I could truly count on now. The wind picked up, sending a shiver through my thin cardigan. I realized I hadn't moved since he left, still standing in the driveway like an abandoned pet, waiting for its owner to come home. Except he wasn't coming back. Not this time. I turned on my heel and walked inside, locking the door behind me. Not to keep him out. He already had a key. But to remind myself that I was alone now. The house felt different the moment I stepped inside. Too quiet, too hollow, like the walls themselves had absorbed the moment he left. I could still hear the faint hum of the heater kicking in, the soft rustle of the curtains as a breeze crept through the cracked window in the kitchen. But everything else, the familiar presence of him, the weight of his footsteps, the sound of his keys clinking onto the counter, was gone. I sank onto the couch, staring at the blank television screen. My reflection looked back at me, tired, wide-eyed, disbelieving. My hand drifted to my stomach, tracing slow circles over the stretched fabric of my sweater. The baby kicked in response, a small but insistent reminder that I wasn't entirely alone. I reached for my phone, thumb hovering over his name. Should I call? Demand an answer that made sense? Ask him how the hell he could do this now, when I was carrying his child? My jaw tightened. Number he made his choice when he drove away. Instead, I scrolled through my recent messages. Just 2 days ago, he had sent me a photo of a crib he liked, captioned, "What do you think? Too modern?" A week before that, he had been talking about baby names. Had it all been an act? Was he pretending for my sake, or had he truly been planning to run all along? A sharp knock at the door startled me. My heart leapt into my throat. For a second, I let myself believe it was him, that he had come to his senses, that he was standing on the other side of the door, ready to apologize, to beg me to take him back, to swear he just needed a few hours to clear his head. But when I opened the door, it wasn't my husband. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Carter, wrapped in her usual oversized shawl, her sharp eyes scanning my face, the way only an old woman who's seen too much could. "Everything all right, dear?" she asked. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. "Yeah, just a long day," she hummed, clearly unconvinced. "Saw him drive off in a hurry." A pause. "Saw you standing there after, too." I glanced past her, down the empty street. "Yeah, he had somewhere to be." The lie tasted sour on my tongue. Mrs. Carter didn't push. She just nodded like she knew better and patted my arm before shuffling back to her own house. I shut the door, leaning against it, exhaling slowly. This was real. He was gone. And I had no idea what came next. That first night stretched longer than any I could remember. The house, once filled with the familiar sounds of his presence, the low hum of his late-night television shows, the creak of the floorboards as he moved from room to room, was now silent. Too silent. I left the lamp on in the living room, its glow barely reaching the hallway where our wedding photo still hung. I should have taken it down, but I couldn't bring myself to move. I sat at the kitchen table, the cold surface pressing into my arms as I stared at the untouched dinner I had made hours earlier. The smell of roasted chicken had long since faded, leaving behind only the sharp tang of disappointment. I wasn't even hungry, just exhausted, but sleep felt impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the red taillights disappearing, heard the echo of his last words. "You'll be fine." I wasn't fine. I was 8 months pregnant, abandoned, and sitting in a house that suddenly felt too big for one person. I ran my fingers over my belly, feeling the rhythmic thump of tiny kicks, a steady beat, reminding me that I wasn't entirely alone. "It's just us now," I whispered. The words felt heavy, final. I had spent months preparing for motherhood, but not like this. I grabbed my phone, opening my messages again. Nothing from him, not a single missed call, not even a half-hearted text to check if I was okay. It was like he had vanished, like the last few months had meant nothing to him. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, tempted to send a message, not to plead, not to ask him to come back, but just to get some kind of explanation. But then I stopped. What would he even say? That he needed space? That he wasn't ready? That I'd be fine? I already knew the answer. He had left because it was easier for him than staying. A sharp cramp pulled me from my thoughts, a dull ache spreading across my back. I closed my eyes, breathing through it, trying not to panic. It wasn't labor, not yet. Just the weight of everything pressing down on me at once. I moved to the bedroom, pulling the blankets around me, but sleep never came. I lay there in the dark, staring at the empty space beside me. The same space where he used to rest his hand on my belly at night, murmuring something about how surreal it all felt. That space was cold now. I turned onto my side, clutching a pillow against me as my baby shifted inside me. I could do this alone. I had to. But the part of me that still believed in him, in us, was shrinking by the second. And when morning came, I knew it would be gone completely. By morning, reality settled in like a weight pressing against my chest. He hadn't called. He hadn't texted. He hadn't come back. I sat at the kitchen table, my untouched coffee growing cold in my hands. The baby shifted inside me, rolling lazily as if sensing my unease. I pressed a hand against my belly, grounding myself, one step at a time. That was all I could do. I picked up my phone and called him. The first ring felt endless, stretching time in a way that made my stomach twist. The second ring made my fingers tighten around the mug. By the fourth, I already knew. "This number is no longer in service." The automated voice sliced through the silence, cold and final. I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to catch up. He had changed his number. He didn't just leave. He cut himself off entirely. No explanation. No closure. Just gone. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to sit here waiting for answers from a man who didn't even have the decency to face me. I grabbed my keys and drove to his office. The receptionist barely looked up when I walked in, her nails clicking against her keyboard. "I'm here for Daniel," I said, my voice steady despite the storm building inside me. She glanced at me, then at my belly, then back at her screen. "Daniel doesn't work here anymore." My fingers curled into a fist. "What?" "He quit 2 weeks ago, left a forwarding email, but I doubt he checks it." She sighed, pushing her glasses up. "You're not the first one looking for him." I swallowed hard. 2 weeks. He had been planning this long before he left. Every conversation, every moment we spent picking out baby names, every little gesture of affection, it had all been a lie. He hadn't just panicked and left in the heat of the moment. He had prepared for this. I turned and walked out, gripping my phone like it could somehow anchor me. I should have been angry. I was angry. But underneath the fury was something deeper, something colder. I had been married to a man who had been planning his escape while I was preparing to bring our child into the world. He didn't just leave me, he erased himself from my life. I drove home in silence, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. My mind raced, trying to piece together what I had just learned. He hadn't left impulsively. He had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. The crib he had sent me a picture of, the baby names he had pretended to consider, had all of it been an act? A distraction while he put his escape in motion? By the time I reached my driveway, my breath was coming in short, uneven bursts. I wasn't just abandoned. I had been deceived, betrayed. I pulled out my phone again, scrolling through old texts, looking for something, anything, that hinted at what he had been planning. Nothing. He had been careful, no warnings, no signs of hesitation. But then, a text from his mother. "Call me when you can." I hesitated before pressing the dial button. She picked up almost immediately. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick with something that sounded like regret. "I was hoping you'd call." I swallowed hard. "Did you know?" The words barely made it past my lips. A long pause. Then a sigh. "I didn't know he was leaving you," she admitted. "But I knew something was wrong. He asked me for money last month. Said he was in trouble, but he wouldn't say what kind." My stomach twisted. Money. Of course. I had been so consumed with the betrayal, I hadn't even thought about the financial side of things. We had joint accounts, shared bills, savings meant for the baby. Had he touched them? "I don't know where he is," she continued. "He hasn't answered my calls. But if he's running, it's from something bigger than responsibility." I felt lightheaded. The pieces were coming together too fast. He had quit his job. He had changed his number. He had asked his own mother for money. And now, he was nowhere to be found. I pulled up my banking app, my hands shaking. The moment the numbers loaded on the screen, my stomach dropped. Our savings account, the one we had built together, the one meant for hospital bills, baby supplies, and maternity leave, was empty. He hadn't just left. He had stolen from me. From us. And I was going to make him pay for it. The sight of that empty bank account sent a chill through me, the kind that starts in your chest and spreads until you can't breathe. He hadn't just abandoned me. He had robbed me blind. I gripped the edge of the counter, forcing myself to stay upright. My legs felt weak, my stomach tight with something heavier than anger. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about my child. Our child. My baby. Who had no say in any of this, whose future had just been thrown into uncertainty because their father was a coward. I dialed the bank, my fingers numb against the screen. When the automated menu finally connected me to a human voice, I barely kept my tone even. "My husband cleared out our joint savings account. I need to know when the withdrawals started." The woman on the other end of the line was polite, but firm. "I'm sorry, but since it was a joint account, he had legal access to those funds." My grip tightened around the phone. "I understand that. I just need the details." A few keystrokes later, she read off the dates. The first withdrawal was nearly 2 months ago. Small at first, just a few hundred here, a few hundred there. But as the weeks passed, the amounts grew. 1,000, then 2. Until finally, last night, after he had walked out on me, he had emptied the rest in one final transaction. The money was gone. I hung up without saying another word. My heart pounded as I turned to my laptop, pulling up every financial record I could find. Credit cards, utility bills, anything that had his name attached. And that's when I saw it. A second credit card, one I hadn't recognized before, opened in my name, but used entirely by him. Thousands of dollars charged in the last 6 months. Restaurants, hotels, plane tickets. None of it matched our life together. A wave of nausea hit me. He hadn't just stolen our savings. He had been living an entirely separate life. On my name, my credit. I closed my laptop, my hands shaking. This wasn't just a case of a man getting cold feet and running away. This was fraud. This was theft. And now, I had proof. I grabbed my phone again, this time dialing a different number. My aunt, Sarah, the only lawyer in the family. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, sweetheart, what's going on?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I need legal advice." A pause, then her voice sharpened. "Tell me everything." So I did. By the time I finished, there was no hesitation in her response. "He thinks he can just disappear?" she said, her tone cold. "Oh, honey, he has no idea what's coming for him." By the time I hung up with Sarah, something in me had shifted. The heartbreak was still there, lingering beneath the surface, but it was drowned out by something sharper. Rage. He had counted on me being too devastated, too overwhelmed to fight back. He had left me pregnant, alone, and financially drained, thinking I'd crumble under the weight of it all. But he had underestimated me. Sarah didn't waste time. Within hours, she had pulled up the legal documents we needed: bank statements, credit card records, proof of fraudulent charges under my name. "This isn't just him running away," she said as we sat at my kitchen table, papers spread between us. "He's committed financial fraud, and since he did it while abandoning a pregnant spouse, courts don't look kindly on that." I exhaled slowly, pressing a hand to my stomach. The baby kicked again, as if responding to the shift in my resolve. "So what do we do?" "We start with freezing everything." She slid her laptop toward me, already pulling up forms. "I'm putting a hold on your credit. He won't be able to open anything else in your name. Then we file for spousal abandonment and theft." She paused, giving me a hard look. "And we go after him for child support." Hard. I blinked. "Even if he's disappeared?" Sarah's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Oh, trust me, sweetheart. He thinks he can disappear, but the legal system is very good at finding men who owe money." I had never felt more grateful for her than in that moment. She worked quickly, typing with the precision of someone who had done this too many times before. As I sat there, I let it all sink in. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't even just about justice. It was about taking back control. For too long, I had let myself feel helpless, as if I had no choice but to accept what he had done to me. But I did have a choice. I could fight. I would fight. By the end of the night, Sarah had filed the first wave of legal motions. "It'll take some time, but trust me, he won't be able to stay hidden forever," she assured me. I nodded, staring down at the paperwork. His name was there, printed in sharp black ink. But it didn't hold the power it once did. He had made a mistake when he left me. But his biggest mistake? Thinking I wouldn't come after him. Days passed, and then a week. I kept expecting to wake up to some kind of message from him. An excuse, a half-hearted apology, maybe even an attempt to explain himself. But there was nothing. Just silence. Sarah stayed on top of everything. She filed an official police report for fraud, submitted the petition for spousal abandonment, and initiated a court motion to begin tracking his financial activity. "The moment he tries to use one of those accounts, we'll know where he is," she promised. I focused on what I could control: doctor's appointments, finalizing baby preparations, getting my finances in order. Every step felt like reclaiming a part of my life that he had tried to steal from me. Then, the first crack in his disappearance came from the most unexpected place. His sister, Megan. I hadn't spoken to her much since he left. She had sent a few tentative messages checking in, but I hadn't responded. I wasn't sure if she knew what he had done, or if she was just trying to keep the peace. But now, she was calling me, and something in my gut told me to answer. The moment I picked up, her voice came through, sharp with urgency. "I need to tell you something." I stiffened. Go ahead. She hesitated, then sighed. I don't know where he is, but I know he's been reaching out to people for money. Friends, distant relatives, he even called Dad. I frowned. Your dad? They haven't spoken in years. Exactly, she said. That's how desperate he is. And there's more. He told my cousin he was planning to leave before you even got pregnant. A chill ran down my spine. What? Megan exhaled. He was in trouble. Some kind of financial mess. He told them he needed an exit plan. Then you got pregnant. And he panicked. I gripped the phone tighter. So he hadn't just abandoned me. He had never planned to stay. Everything. The baby names, the nursery plans, the way he had kissed my belly at night, had all been an act. A deep, slow anger settled into my bones. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice cold. Because I found out he emptied your savings, she said, and I'm not going to cover for him. You deserve to know what kind of person he really is. I sat there, gripping my belly, feeling the weight of her words. He had been planning his escape while pretending to build a future with me. And now, he was running out of places to hide. Megan's words rattled in my head long after we ended the call. He needed an exit plan. He had been looking for a way out long before he ever walked out that door. My pregnancy hadn't scared him off. It had delayed him. I sat at the kitchen table, my hand resting protectively over my belly as I let the full weight of that realization sink in. He had pretended, lied, smiled through baby name discussions and crib shopping while secretly planning how to disappear. And when the time came, he made sure to take everything with him. Our money, my security, any chance I had at a smooth transition into motherhood. Except he hadn't accounted for one thing. Mr. Sarah wasted no time after I told her what Megan had said. If he's asking people for money, that means he's reachable, she said, pacing as she spoke. It means someone knows where he is, even if they're not admitting it. She was right. No one disappears without a trace. He wasn't some criminal mastermind. He was a man running out of options. Then, the breakthrough came. A notification popped up on my phone, an alert from one of the fraud reports Sarah had filed. It flagged an attempted transaction on one of the credit cards he had opened in my name. He was trying to book a hotel in another city. Got you, Sarah murmured when I sent her the screenshot. Within an hour, she had placed an official legal freeze on his ability to withdraw from or use any of the accounts connected to me. He might have thought he was staying a step ahead, but now, he had nothing left to drain. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was him. A text. Short. Almost laughable. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. After weeks of silence, now he wanted to talk? Now, after stealing from me, abandoning me pregnant, cutting off contact? Sarah leaned over my shoulder, reading it. Oh, now he wants to talk? Wonder why? I already knew, because now he was the one with nothing. I stared at the message for a long moment, my grip tightening around the phone. We need to talk. That was it. No apology, no explanation, just those 4 words, as if I was supposed to drop everything and come running. Sarah scoffed. You're not responding. I wasn't planning to. He had ignored every call, cut himself off completely, stolen from me. And now that he was backed into a corner, he expected a conversation? Number not on his terms. Instead, Sarah took the next step. She contacted the lawyer handling the fraud case and forwarded the notification from his attempted transaction. Within hours, a motion was filed to officially serve him with legal action. The hotel he had tried to book? The police were notified. The system was closing in, and for the first time, he was the one with nowhere to run. That evening, another text came. I know you're mad. I messed up. But you're making this worse than it needs to be. The audacity of it made me laugh. An actual, bitter laugh. I was making this worse? I, the woman 8 months pregnant, left without a dime, was the problem? Sarah shook her head, disgusted. Textbook manipulation. I put my phone down. Let him sweat. And sweat he did. The next morning he called. I didn't pick up. A voicemail followed. His voice was different now, not casual, not confident. There was an edge of panic to it. Listen, I didn't want it to go like this. I just needed time to figure things out. I thought, look, we can work this out. Just call me, okay? Number I forwarded the voicemail to Sarah. Serve him. And that's exactly what we did. By the end of the week, he had been formally served with legal action: spousal abandonment, fraud, child support enforcement. His stolen money was frozen. His debts were laid bare. And when he finally realized just how deep in trouble he was, the last text came. Please, I don't have anything left. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Neither did I when you left me. But now, I had everything I needed: my child, my future, my strength, and he had nothing.